world, and welcome to Decode or Not to Code. I'm Mileva, and I'm really happy to be here today. As always, I'm here with my friend Stefan. How are you doing, Stefan?
I am super excited and also slightly terrified because last minute tooling has forsaken us slightly,
Yes.
but it's going to be a very special episode.
Absolutely. We've got a great session lined up for you. If you're new here, Stefan and I meet every other week and code together. Stefan actually has a ton of experience in .NET, and me, I'm just trying to keep up, really. But between the two of us, we usually figure it out and we learn from each other every single day. Hi, Eric. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks for being back and spending the evening with us, or in whatever time zone you're at. But if you're here last time, like Eric, we wrote a source generator, but there was one thing we didn't show, namely how to produce warnings and errors from a generator. And now technically, it's not recommended to do this from a generator, but rather from a dedicated analyzer. But the real reason we didn't show it is that, we actually didn't know how to do it. And so what can you do? What can you do when you hit a roadblock like this? There are a couple of options. For example, you could go to the internet and read some blog posts like this one, or this was really useful. Or there's another one that I think that you had, or was it just this one? Yeah, there it is. So you can do that, or you can do what we did and invite an expert to your live stream. And with no further ado, please welcome our guest for today, Jason Buck. Woohoo!
Hello.
Well, welcome back.
Yeah, the second time I'll be here, so no stranger.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining. It's so good to have you back.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience briefly?
Sure. So my name is Jason Buck. I'm a staff software engineer with a company called Rocket Mortgage. I've been there for almost 5 years. Before that, for almost 25 years, I worked mostly as a consultant. If you can see over my shoulder there, it's hard to see, but I'm a Microsoft MVP, and been that now for 18 years and do a lot of, speaking and writing and streaming and stuff like that. So try to stay up to date as much as I can, even though I'm getting kind of, as you can tell with the beard, I'm getting the grays. I'm getting a little bit closer, slowly but surely, hopefully, to where I can retire at some point. But I still enjoy what I do. I still love the day job. I still love doing stuff at night with coding. So that's pretty much who I am. You have my GitHub page there right now. So there, one of the things I personally can't call myself an expert. I don't want to do that, but I do have a very strong interest in stuff, all things Roslyn. And so you can see, some of the projects there are stuff that I've done in Roslyn. The one Rocks is actually a mocking library, similar to what you would see with either like NSubstitute or MOQ, but it's all based on source generators. So the nice thing about that is that it's pretty fast when you run stuff with the mocks, because it's all compile time and there's no language limitations either. So that kind of stuff is pretty cool. And so that's why I'm glad that you invited me for this stuff, because I love just seeing what people come up with and learning a thing or three, because like you mentioned, with one of the things we'll talk about today of suppressors, I actually didn't even know that was a thing. I was like, I was completely clueless. So it's good to do these kind of streams and interactions and learning from other people. So, and you also have my YouTube channel up there too as a tab. Yeah. If people wouldn't mind, if they to subscribe, I won't say like, but you can subscribe, and that would be great, because I'm trying to get that subscriber count up. I moved a lot towards streaming lately, like in the last 6 months to a year, and doing not only like live gaming streams, but also live coding streams. And like you can see, I've been playing Outer Wilds at night. That's a really fun game. But I also do what I call random code streams. And so I'll just do some coding and do that online as well. So
Also, so you not only do game playthroughs, you also do Advent of Code playthroughs.
Yeah, I was doing that for a while. This year I did Advent of Code in 2022, but off camera. I just was trying to get those. And the goal at that time was to try to get both parts. Yeah, if people don't know what advent of code is, check it out, because it's a fun way to just learn different puzzles and try to see if you can solve them in code. So, and you have to pick you can pick any language you want. It doesn't matter. So I did that, and then I did a summary video on what I learned. This year, I decided, well, I'll try to just get through as many as I can. I think I got through 42 or 43 of 50. And then the remaining ones were just like, I have no clue. I have no clue how to solve them. So I just kind of, stop there. But I got through most of them. Yeah. So.
And that's the great thing about live streaming as well. You can get like input from your viewers too. Like there's been so many times when Stefan and I were just like stuck, and then one of our viewers solved it for us.
Yeah. Well, with something like this, I think this is great. The one thing with advent of code was I had to keep reminding people to not give just hints flat out, because part of it was I wanted to struggle. I wanted to try to think through how would I solve this. And if I was truly stuck, then I would say, okay, if somebody wants to give me a hint, then that's okay. But I didn't want somebody just to basically solve the problem for me. I wanted to kind of try to see what I could figure out on my own. So, but with something like this, again, it's great because you do this interaction and you can learn from each other. So,
yeah, for sure.
And yeah, all your content is highly appreciated, also by the eclectic dev. He really enjoys your talks. Well,
the eclectic dev is actually a friend of mine. His name is Alan, and I told him to stop by and harass us, but he's busy today. But he at least told me this, say good luck and stuff. So at least he posted that before we started. So.
And you have helped us a lot already. Was it like 2 years ago-ish, something like that? You helped us build a tool that detects interceptors in your projects or solutions. But yeah, so interceptors are generated, or interceptors usually are generated by source generators, and you can also emit warnings and errors by source generators. Well, you really shouldn't from a performance perspective. But there is a dedicated way to write analyzers and fixes. So shall we jump right into the code?
Yeah. And you mentioned a really interesting point there, real brief, which is if you have a source generator and you do want to emit diagnostics, that's okay, but you shouldn't do it within the generator itself. Like I think you mentioned, you can have diagnostics within your package, within your assembly with the source generator. That's fine, but you don't want to do them because there's an API within the generator where you can add diagnostics, and you shouldn't do that. But you can put the diagnostics as analyzers in your source generator project, and that's fine. I actually changed rocks. I was doing it the wrong way, and then I read about that and was like, oh, okay. So then you just move them over to explicit analyzers, and then that's fine. So yeah, exactly what you're showing.
From the source, what is that? The source generation, source production context.
Yeah.
You can not only add sources, but also report those diagnostics. And what is this diagnostic?
So diagnostics are basically just things that are used to report information back to the developer. So they can be simple informational messages. They're not necessarily errors by themselves. They're just things that you've done on your code to analyze it, and you've come up with, like a diagnostic. They'll say, hey, maybe your blood pressure is a little bit too high, or hey, maybe you have a blood test and they find something maybe a little bit too high on a level. So that's a diagnostic. Doesn't mean that you're in serious trouble, but they're just trying to say, hey, maybe you need to adjust something in your diet or something like that. So that's what a diagnostic essentially is. But we typically think of them as developers as those are the errors that show up and prevent us from actually committing. Well, you shouldn't commit code that doesn't compile. That should be like the baseline. But yeah, they can also just be informational things. They can also be warnings, depending on the level that you set the severity. But I like what somebody on the compiler team at Microsoft said. that warnings are just errors that lack conviction. And I love that line. I really, really do. So either just make it a green light and you go, or it's a red light and you stop, one or the other.
And the .NET SDK that ships with quite a bunch of diagnostics. I think those are the ones from this documentation here that are enabled per default.
Yep.
Like, for example, where we could use SBAN instead of a range-based indexing to have better performance.
Yeah, at this point with modern .NET projects, the analyzers are at least included with your project by default. You no longer have to reference the net analyzers package.
Mm-hmm.
Still do that for older like .NET Framework projects, but for new ones, that's there. And then you can also specify a level to say, do I want to turn everything on, or do I want to just turn on a specific? Yeah, exactly what you're showing there. So you can be a little bit specific and picky about how loud do you want this to be. I personally, I use all. I pick all because because of exactly what you just showed, which is if there's something, especially as the framework and the language evolves, this is also going to get updated. They're going to add new ones as time goes on. So it's very common to say from one language version to the other, .NET version to the other, or even if they do a point release, that there'll be new ones added. And so you might pull up a repository that you haven't done something with in a couple months, and now things got updated, and all of a sudden you'll start to see squiggles or warnings in your code that you didn't have before. So, and they can be very beneficial, like what you saw with the span one, that are giving you hints to make your code potentially a little bit faster. So I personally love to get that kind of response, that kind of, the speed of typing responses to tell me what I may be doing wrong, or what I might want to do a little faster. So yeah, that analysis mode is the setting that you can change.
Oh wait, but that's a Net Standard 2.0 project because it's an analyzer. I think there's also another setting that I need to enable for these, but I never recall.
Yeah, I've got a couple projects just on my machine that I've used just to look at, and I think you should just be able to say analysis mode, and that works. Although you're right, with the .NET Standard project, you do have to reference the analyzers. That's another. It's like if you're just doing a .NET, like a .NET 8 project, then they're included by default. But framework and also standard projects, you have to include the net analyzers package as a package reference.
Because I'm wondering how many potential mistakes or improvements are there. Yeah, we do get a couple of warnings when we enable it. So yeah, I guess there is. We have
work to do.
So it's tasks to do. So you go ahead and always enable all of them.
Yeah.
Do you also do warnings as errors usually?
Yes.
So
because again, if
your warnings become conviction.
Yeah, then they have that conviction. It's again the analogy to the stoplight. If you have something that's yellow, they're chancing it if you try to go for it, but it's allowed. In other words, you're still going to be allowed to compile, and it will still be a successful compilation. But there may be things in there that you really, really should take a look at. And I mean, I've been using analyzers in .NET code way back to FXCOP, which was the precursor to analyzers in Roslyn. They have a very similar kind of design and feel to how it works, but that was also way before it was actually integrated into the compiler API. And I think the first project we went all in with using FXCOP, and it ended up being called, funnily enough, code analysis when they moved it into Visual Studio around 2008. So that's why you see a lot of these projects named, or packages named Microsoft.code analysis. So we were on a project where we weren't using it, and I said, let's just, me and another developer, we spent a week going through our code base, and that's what may happen when you turn it on if you don't have it on right away. is all of a sudden you're going to see a sea of red and you're going to cry because you think you're the worst developer in the world. And that's not true. It's just now this is flagging things that you just didn't know about. And so we spent a week addressing all them. But the cool thing is that now that we had that awareness of, oh, we should be doing this now as like a coding practice, it became much less that it would get flagged when people were working on code, because you started learning to not do those things in the first place. Now, at that time, it wasn't automatic. So you had to wait until we actually got to the build server to see those or run it locally. Now it always happens. So it's a much better experience. So, but yeah, I turned them all on because I want to know. And then you can either take action if it's really annoying and that's what we'll be getting into later, which is suppressing it and what some options are in terms of suppressing some of these things.
Cool. So let's produce some squigglies.
All right.
Usually when in our live stream, when we code, then we always ask ourselves the question like var versus no var. For example, number var versus no var, or like being explicit about for example, modifiers per default. Member methods are private, but should I really put the private there? When I think usually we go with the let's be explicit about it. So it's not accidentally the default; it's explicitly we made that choice. In C#9, we got the record types. We also saw that last stream. That comes along with the deconstructor. But now in C#10, we can also a record is a class by default. In C#10, we also got record structs. And with that, we can now also explicitly declare record classes. So what I'd love to have is a little squiggly here. Tell me, hey, you're on C#.
You're an artist with code. You're not an artist with lines. So that's
not quite. To indicate, hey, we agreed, let's be explicit. Let's write class here. How do we start?
Well, first, I want to say that that's actually a good idea. And the thing with analyzers and diagnostics is to, the ones that I've written, there's a project that I use when I do a presentation at conferences on analyzers and code fixes. And I have a couple of examples in there, is to really be specific. That's one of the first things I'll suggest to people is if you want to do this stuff, be very specific as to what you're trying to find or potentially change. And that may sound maybe a little weird or obvious, but especially with this stuff with Roslyn, it's really important to know what you're trying to target. Like in your case, you're probably going to be looking for a class definition or a record definition. And that really, really matters. So, and for a case like this, it's also for just demo purposes, this is pretty small and concise, which is good too. This is not going to be something where you may see some of these refactorings and diagnostics that come from Microsoft where they actually do a lot of changes. This is going to be very, very specific. So that's also good too. But yeah, you really want to be very focused on what it is that you're trying to find and identify.
So I guess, because the language allows a lot, can we actually have nested records? Oh, yes. Do we want to find this for these two? Okay, now it gets interesting.
You just see, the thing with records is that they're just types, just like anything else on .NET. And I think that's something that trips people up. Actually at work, somehow this came up that somebody mentioned to me that they basically thought that records were structs by default, and that's how they were defined. And I had to say to them, no, actually records were classes when they first were introduced. And then they added what you showed, which is you can make them structs. But at the end of the day, they're either a class or a struct with a whole bunch of, like you said, they have the deconstructors, they have a quality built in, they create all the properties for you that are read only, all that good stuff. So they're just types though. So yeah, you can nest them and you can do whatever you want with them like other types. So
so how can we start building something that produces a little squiggly here, but not here and neither there?
So you probably already have, the first thing you're going to want is a project or a solution. And that's what you have here. Now, one thing I don't see here, which is actually probably a good thing, is I don't know how you created this. Did you use the templates or did you just build a solution and then add the projects as you needed them?
No, used it from a template.
Okay, so the template that is in Visual Studio, I would actually, you can use it the first couple of times if you're interested in building analyzers and code fixes. You need to install like the compiler API SDK in Visual Studio so that you get these templates there. Yeah, the ones that you're showing here. And they're fine. They used to, and I don't know if they still do this. They also include what's called a V6 file or V6 project. It's an extensibility project. I highly recommend, as I think I see here, you just nuke it. You just get rid of it because it's really not that helpful for testing. What I've actually done is I'll just create your .NET Standard project like you have here, a test project so you can test, which I'm glad you've got as well. And then your samples, what you can also do is I create a separate solution because as we've talked about before the stream started is refactorings, analyzers, source generators have the fun property that if you change them, Visual Studio, if you're referencing them from another project, it won't update them all the time. And so you have to shut Visual Studio down and start up again. I think Rider doesn't have that though. I think it's better in terms of how it allows those to change. So what I've done is I create a separate solution that has the project, like in your case, the Our Analyzers project, and then another project that references it called Scenarios. And then I just will have code that I know is supposed to violate things so that I can see all the red as I open them up. And then it's a separate solution. So that way I just don't, I can load that up and load that down as I need it. But I definitely don't use the V6, and I would highly recommend people don't do that because that's Visual Studio specific. It requires you to install the extension, and it's kind of messy. So I just be like, nah, don't do that.
I believe I do have one project where actually, do I have that? Oh yeah, they're actually those are this one, right?
Yeah, I would personally just, I don't use those anymore. So, but yeah, to start, you can use that template, or depending upon how comfortable you are with setting up projects, you just basically create a class library. That's a .NET Standard class library, and that's an interesting thing is that they have to be like source generators, class .NET Standard, because of all sorts of fun hosting reasons in Visual Studio primarily. That's why you have to do that. And then you can set some of the other values that you have here. Like, is it a Roslyn component? That's another one that you may want to set. But at the end of the day, they're just class library projects. So with also the right references that you have below. You need the references to the code analysis projects so that you can actually get the base core types that you need to create a diagnostic.
And we also have analyzers that help us build analyzers.
It's fun because for some definition of fun, I find this fun. But there's, as people have started to create source generators and analyzers and things like that, you start learning, well, how do you actually build those correctly? So there are analyzer projects for analyzers. You can insert whatever meme you want at that point, but that's what happens. And so, like, one of the things I've noticed with analyzers is you'll get, and I don't know if you have that in your code just yet, but one of the ones that always pops up is it will tell you there's like two methods to call: enable concurrent execution and configure generated code analysis or something like that. And it's these analyzers looking at your analyzers, telling you how to make those analyzers better. But it's great. It's like, that's exactly what they're there for. So
actually, yeah, we started from the template, just deleted a bunch of code, but also kept some for the basic shape of it. So actually these two methods, right? So if I remove these two, are we getting screamed at? Yes, we are. We should configure the generated code analysis and also enable concurrent execution.
Yep, exactly.
Ooh, is there fixes for that? Ooh, there is.
Yes.
Ooh, that's cool. So I do Control Dot or Alt Enter, then I get this suggestion here, and I don't need to remember or look in documentation. I can also get a preview. Then I just can apply it, and now the warning is gone.
Yep.
So a concurrent execution is that analyzers can run in parallel, I suppose. What's the generated code analysis?
That's my guess is why it's allowing your analyzers to be called within an IDE like Visual Studio and do it in a concurrent way. Over time, Visual Studio used to be, way back in the day, primarily single-threaded. And now in 2025, and over that time, you would see where more and more things you could do that weren't blocking. You could run tests, but then you can also go to Git and say commit while those tests are running. Whereas before, those types of activities were usually like you had to wait for one to finish to the other. And so with analyzers, allowing them to have this concurrent execution allows it to basically potentially, run, I don't want to say different threads, but run in a friendlier environment, in a friendlier way in Visual Studio. And this actually brings up another good point, which is source generators, analyzers, all these things. You have to keep in mind as an author that you want them to run as fast as you can. And that's true with any code that we write. We always want them to run fast. But these are running at the speed of compilation. And that means is like as you're typing, these things may or may not be firing really, really fast. And so you don't want to hang up the user as much as possible. So you have to put a lot of thought into play. And the C# team, the Visual Studio team, they'll kind of harp on this a lot. And that's something I try to keep in the back of my head, which is you don't want the blame for a bad analyzer just to default to Microsoft. If somebody's doing something, they write an analyzer or a source generator, and it's not performant. The unfortunate, the party that's going to look like they messed up is Visual Studio. They're going to think, Visual Studio being slow, where it's potentially not that at all. So when you write these things, you got to keep in mind, you want to get to your end destination as fast as you can.
And for the configure generated code analysis, so this is generated code, like code that is with the auto-generated, like I guess also includes code that is produced by source generators, right?
Yeah.
And then we can set if we want to analyze them, report diagnostics for them, or just do none. I kind of prefer none for this case because the user can't really change generated code. What do you think about that?
I am looking at what I've got in my code. I've actually got picked what the code fixer told me to do. So I just left it at that. And I'm like, it's smarter than me. So I just left it at that value. So I'd be curious to see what none would do, but maybe just leave it this way for now.
Fair enough.
So we have
this, you got this at the point now where it's like it's got the skeleton, it's got the core structure there. But now this is where people have to go, okay, what do I do at this point? How do I actually, I want to find a record that isn't using class or struct. So how do I actually do that? And so I'm curious, how would you do that? How would you try to find that? Because there's a couple of ways you can.
I guess so far on the stream, our move has always been go to sharplab.io.
Yes.
Well, actually, since we're in Visual Studio, when we install the SDK, the Roslyn SDK, Visual Studio has that built in. Why that does not have that just yet, we'll have soon though.
You have to
So I
click
guess
on some code, and then it will
we can
show
just
up.
write some code and hope maybe we need to build.
It should show up.
And okay, tooling has.
Maybe try to pin the visualizer and then click on something.
Yes, that works indeed. I see. So I would try to make % of that. Ooh, it is indeed the record declaration that you have mentioned. So that's neither a class nor a struct declaration. It really is a record declaration. And so finding all record declarations where's not a difference to the others.
So what you're driving at here is actually something that's really good, which is if I want to write an analyzer for this, what I can do is just write some code like you have here in this examples file, and then use the syntax visualizer. This is an extensibility window that comes when you install the compiler SDK for Visual Studio.
So that's under extensions? No, that's not extension. That's when I hit the installer, right? So when we go to the VS installer,
yes,
you can go to.
You should go to modify.
Modify.
Yeah.
Yes. And find the. It's part of this one, right?
If you move to the right, I think you probably already have it installed. There, it's right in the middle under optional. .NET Compiler Platform SDK.
Ah, there it is.
So that's the one that if you don't have it installed yet, even if you don't want to use the project templates, still install this because you get that syntax visualizer window, and that helps so much when doing anything Roslyn related. So because then you can come back to this and you can say, okay, I've clicked on, like if you click on the example record on the left, and you'll notice that when you click on that, then on the right, it moves around based on where your cursor is. So you can start going, oh, there's like this whole syntax tree. And people on the Roslyn team are very specific. It's like, it's not an abstract syntax tree as you learn on, compiler classes. It is a syntax tree. It's full white space, everything defined in your code. But then as you move to like the struct, you're going to see, oh, there's a struct keyword in or it's actually a record struct declaration. And if you click on the one in the middle, I'm kind of curious. That one's actually, it's a record declaration, but it has the class keyword. So there are different levels in Roslyn in terms of your code and how it's represented. This is the syntax tree version. So this is pretty raw. This gives you like all the comments, all the white space, everything. So it tells you literally the syntax of your code in a tree version, which is good, but that it doesn't give you all the information yet because it's mostly just taking that text and compartmentalizing it in a tree structure. Where you can also use what's called a semantic model, which gives you as the name the name is hinting at, it gives you semantics about your code. So it can start telling you things like, well, this is a type definition, and what does it inherit from, and other things like that you're not going to get from a syntax tree. So and then there's also things that are in Roslyn called operations. So those are even at a higher level to say, I want to create a class. So there's like a creation operation. There's other ones there. That's the one that just comes to mind. But there are other operations that you can use that may be a little bit easier in terms of telling in your analyzer what you're looking for. So you have a couple options. Do I go at the syntax level? Do I go at the semantic tree and look for type symbols that are records? But you're trying to see, does it actually have that keyword there? So maybe the right approach is to go from a syntax tree perspective to look for those things. So, but these are the things as you're designing and authoring diagnostics or analyzers. What are your options and what you're trying to look for?
I see. So yeah, so let's inspect the syntax tree and see if for record declarations, not record struct declarations though, the class keyword is there or not.
Right. You've already got one case, which is if you don't have to look for record structs, because if it's a record struct, that means you put the struct keyword there. So you don't have to look for those. You just have to look for records. And like you just said, does it have the keyword within it?
Oops, a little typo, but cool. So we defined this rule, comes with a template. We added an ID and some information like the default severity, whether it's produced per default, a helper link that one could click when it shows in the error list. And then what we need to override from the diagnostic analyzer, that we also tell, okay, this is a C# diagnostic analyzer. We tell the supported diagnostics. So is that so that the host knows what may or may not be produced?
Right, because you can produce, and I know I've been switching terms a little bit here, and I should be more precise. You are creating an analyzer that can produce one or more diagnostics. So it's possible to actually produce multiple, based on what you're writing. So this is, it's basically telling the hosting infrastructure what you could possibly produce. Doesn't mean you will, but yeah. So you could have two of them like you're showing here, and that's fine.
And then we initialize this thing. This reminds me very much of incremental generators, where you just have the initialize, and then you need to build up some pipeline that then later on gets executed. Is that similar?
Yep, same thing, the same kind of concept. So
let's go ahead and in this analysis context, hit dot, and let's see what we got. We have this configure and the concurrency. And we get a bunch of register methods. Okay, now I guess we just need to pick the right one.
This is all, and again, if you're looking for operations, you might want to pick a register operation action. For example, one that I've done is I'm looking for an object creation. So in that case, I would use register operation action. So it's kind of like if you want to pick a semantic model, if you want to pick like a type symbol or a parameter symbol, then you could register a semantic model action. So which one would you pick here?
So since we mentioned we would start out with the syntax. So would we pick, I guess, one of the syntactic ones? Syntax. So would we go with the tree? Oh, okay. So we can analyze the entire tree or a particular node?
I would think, and it's funny because I used to do this one a lot, but then over time, they actually added operations that was not there with the first release of Roslyn. But I think with the syntax tree option, I think you want to pick a specific node, and in our case, because you have that, it's a generic. So I think with register syntax node action, I believe what is it actually looking for there? Oh, the syntax kind. So that is a T language. What is it again? T language.
So that's just a struct. Let's see. Enum type giving the syntax node kinds of the source language. So is that like a syntax node kind or something?
Yeah, there should be something like that. It's kind of fun that they don't give you a like they type it to something specifically. But yeah, the syntax kind here, there should be a record.
And we have the record declaration, and oops, that So when I hit the key, okay, well, we see there is a record declaration and the record struct declaration. Well, we ruled that one out, so I guess we go for the record declaration.
Yeah.
So, and this one now takes an action. I see. Okay, so that's the callback when it's invoked, and we can pass multiple syntax kinds that we want to analyze. I'm not used to the kind of a source generator lingo, so I'm going to go with execute.
Yeah, that's fine.
And let's have that method generated. If it can be static. And now we get, if I will type it correctly, and now we have the syntax node analysis context, which yields cancellation token compilation, the containing symbol where we found this node in, I suppose, if it's generated code, some options, and the semantic model.
Yes. So when this callback is invoked, the one thing that you know is that it's saying, I'm only calling you because I found a record declaration in code.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to worry about any of the other syntax node types. You know that if you look at context.node, which I think is, what is that defined as? That's just a syntax node, the base type. You can cast it to a record declaration and it's safe. You don't have to check that. You know that that's what it's going to be.
Because I only have a singular one. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, if you pass them more, then you have to probably be a little bit cuter than that because you don't necessarily know exactly which one it's going to be. But in this case, yeah, we know that that's that. And so now we're almost close because there's only one thing we need to look at. Does it have the class keyword in it? Or more to the point, well, no, if it had struct, it would have been the record struct declaration. And we've already ruled that out. We don't have to look at that one. All we need to see is, does it have the class keyword contained within?
So do we go, is this a modifier? I also saw there is a class or struct keyword.
Yeah. So this is where you go beyond my knowledge. And I say that in terms of syntax trees are huge. And all the stuff that's not just defined within all the syntax nodes or syntax tokens or syntax trivia, but the properties and things that they contain is also vast. So this is like, I always get to a point where I'm like, I'm getting close, but now it's kind of a guessing game. Okay, now what do I really want to look for? You know, do I look for, in fact, if you go to the syntax visualizer, that window, when you've got examples up, and yeah, pin that again. So if you click on the record class, you can see that there is under record declaration, it has this class keyword here. You might think, well, is there a keywords array or something like that that tells me on a particular syntax node, can I look for a class keyword? But what you found just by hitting the dot is that there's a class or record or something like that. So maybe that's what we should use. You know, this is where you have to kind of go, which one do I really want to use or not? So, so I'm not sure what this will do.
Actually, it does surprise me because there is also the record struct declaration. Record. Oh, is there no record struct declaration? Is this only, is the record struct declaration, maybe the visualizer does something special there? Or am I typing this wrong? Because we went to the...
I don't know if you got to click on that and see again. What does that...
No, I closed it.
It's under view other windows. The other windows is just the holding bag from Dungeons and Dragons terms where they just throw everything into it. So
no, it doesn't fire up anymore.
Huh? It should, which is kind of sad that it's not.
Because it's not because I have some errors, right? Oh, it is.
Oh, it is.
Oh, it fires. Okay, I'll copy it.
Sometimes I've also noticed that you have to like hit a space and then delete the space, and sometimes it tells the visualizer.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, yeah. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect one. So if you click on record struct declaration in the tree, then on the properties down below, it should tell you, is this a syntax kind or is this a syntax token or what is it? It's a type and it's a kind. So okay. I'm glad you pointed this out. So it is still a record declaration syntax type.
This is what
the syntax kind is record struct declaration. So when you registered your callback, it will still filter out ones that have already said they're a record struct. So we're still good that way. But you're right to point out that there is no separate record struct declaration syntax node. So
I see. But since we are on the kind level, we have, since there is a record struct kind, I guess in our case now, we can be quite certain that this class or struct keyword can never be struct. So I suppose we can check if this is class. Is
or not class.
Or not if it's
like to do the not of it, because when you're writing analyzers, you're really also trying to drive to what is the error case or the warning case, or what is the thing I'm actually looking for to yell at the user about. So yeah, I'm not. So if you hover over that class or struct keyword, what actually is that? It's a syntax token. Okay, so tokens. This one is interesting because there's all these default tokens, all these default keywords, and so what you're about to do in your analyzer is you want to see what kind of token it is. I think that's what you're about to do anyway, right? Is you're doing an its kind or something like that?
I was looking for what is there and checking the kind of it to be not a class declaration.
Okay. All right. Should work.
And can we now do what we saw in the source generator? Can we now also do a .report there?
Nice.
So how can we now report this diagnostic? We need a diagnostic, but we don't have a diagnostic. We only have this diagnostic descriptor.
Right. So what you have to do there is there is a on diagnostic, there's a static method called create. And so that one, if you use that will actually create the diagnostic based on a descriptor and a couple of other things.
Yes, the location would be quite good. So the tool knows where to display the squiggly, right?
That is, yes. It also is helpful in terms of code fixes. Because on the other side of if you don't have to create a code fix with an analyzer, but if you do, you need to know what you were saying was wrong, and then you can potentially use that on the other side. So, with a diagnostic, you pretty much always want to report the location of where it is. And in this case, it would be pretty easy because on the node for the record declaration, you should be able to. There should be a location property on every syntax node.
There's a get location method.
Yes. Okay.
Which has no, I thought there was also no. So one overload, that means only one method. Okay. So we get the location and pass that in.
Yep.
Looks promising. Well, we mentioned tests before. Did quite a bunch of tests. Maybe let's take a brief look at them. We have here our diagnostic analyzer specs. And so this is also using the Microsoft.codeanalysis.testing packages, the same that we used last stream for source generators, where if we put in a bunch of code where we shouldn't report then a diagnostic, because it's just a regular class or a regular structs shouldn't report anything.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a record, well, here it shouldn't report because we got that already, and those are record structs. Should be neither. But oh yeah, in case of C#9, we would like to not report this warning because there is no class just yet, so nothing to fix, but C#10 and upwards, now it should produce. There is this syntax. This took me quite a while to find out, but the template actually has that. We can, with that syntax, with this braces pipe thing, we can put in locations, and basically then, expecting diagnostics to be produced. And so let's run this tests and see how far we get.
So a couple of things that you're mentioning here, I think, are really important. One again is that any type of Roslyn project is, like I said, it's going to be a .NET Standard project 2.0, primarily because Visual Studio still hosts .NET Framework because of the code window that's written in WPF. And you can't host more than one framework at a time in a process. So if you forced everybody to use .NET Framework to write analyzers, that would kind of stink. But you can't also say, well, everybody has to be targeting maybe .NET 8 or something like that. So the bridge has always been .NET Standard, but that bridge is starting to fall apart over time because 2 doesn't, it's basically what you could think of as like what both .NET Standard, .NET Core, I think, and above uses, but also .NET Framework 4.7. But it doesn't keep up with new APIs. So there's more and more and more times where you're like, oh, there's a new language feature, or oh, there's a new API, and you can't use it in your .NET Standard project. So that kind of stinks. But then you're also bringing up another point, which is you don't know what version or language version or .NET version that somebody may be referencing. And that may be important based on code that you want to generate or what you want to look for. Like you said, in .NET 9, you couldn't put these on a record, so it's not an error in that case. But if you're targeting language version 10, then yes. So it's good that I like that you're showing this, because this does show that you can have that flexibility to say, I only want to do it in one case, but not the other. So, and also this tool, or I should say the package that you're referencing to do testing is so important when you're doing anything with Roslyn, because I see this a lot. There's a couple of groups in Discord that Microsoft hosts for doing stuff with C# or writing, stuff in Roslyn. And more often than not, you'll see somebody coming in going, I'm new. How do I test this stuff? I'm running in Visual Studio. And the team will always respond with, use one of these and write unit tests to do it, because it's going to be so much easier. And it's true. Now, yeah, when you showed your syntax in cases where you're trying to find diagnostics, or if you're writing a source generator, you have to get what the resultant generator code should look like, and that can get kind of lengthy. But you don't have to do that unloading and loading thing all the time either. That's what's nice about it. So yeah, and they used to have packages that were specific for each testing library. Like there was one for NUnit, there was one for XUnit and MS Test. They've gotten away from that now and made it so that it's generic across all testing platforms, which is much better. So yeah, just wanted to point that out.
Also noticed we have some NUnit analyzers too. There's analyzers everywhere.
The one for NUnit, well, there's lots in NUnit, but one of them is really nice as if you're using a test case, which I think you have in that test that you were showing before, which by default, .NET can't tell that this attribute is actually going to pass that value if you move all the way to the right, that's going to be language version. So if you made that just a string or, some other value, it should go, it doesn't understand, the value of the argument 0 cannot be assigned to a language version of type string. Yeah. So it helps in those cases to make sure that you have the type matching what's going to be passed in as a parameter to these parameterized tests.
It's really cool. It also has a link to some documentation, so giving me more context and examples to the diagnostic as well. That's amazing. And how to suppress it.
Exactly.
Well, how to configure it. Yeah, there's the suppression.
You mentioned that really briefly when you're talking about setting up the diagnostic, that you can have a link to get help. What I've done in my projects, what NUnit has done, and a lot of other ones I've done, is they just put that documentation in their GitHub repo. And so they put that link there, and then you link directly to that doc, and it works so nice that way. So, but yeah, you definitely want to make sure. I'm also going to point this out. You don't have to start with, and you don't have to have like just 4 numbers there. I've actually changed it. Like for rocks, I'll have a diagnostic rock 1 and then rock 2, just because I want to get away from that. I hope I never find 10,000 things to look for. But, I don't want to have a Y2K issue either, where I'm constrained to just a certain number of digits. So I'm just like, just make it 1 or 2 or 3, and then put a little bit of a name in front of it. You can use NUnit. You can, something that's short, but also descriptive as to where that diagnostic is coming from. And so that can help. So anyway,
I call it hour 1.
You can do that too. You don't want to use CS or CA, because those are the ones from either the compiler as an error, or CA is usually for analyzers or diagnostics. And you kind of don't want to, it's like starting your namespaces with Microsoft or System. You really don't want to do that, because that can get kind of confusing. So something that's relevant to your project that you're working on.
So this really should be unique and identifiable. Yeah. Cool. So let's change this back to language version. So that's even an error. And we ran the tests. And let's take a look at our analyzers. And we have
errors.
A couple of problems. Oh yes, because I'm also expecting a maybe let's put this into here. We can zoom in nicely. I'm also expecting a bit of a message. So this message also allows a something like a string format. So this was part of the template, and I would like to insert the name into there. Well, totally forgot that here. And how can we add some additional, because I think here's the string, because that's a string format, I think it's called, or message format. This would be the message format. So I would like to fill this placeholder with the name of the type.
So that's where you go back to your, there should be, I think in the diagnostic create, there's a third parameter that's just a params.
I see.
God, you're really putting me to the test on this one. Where is all this stuff again? Because I don't, as much as I love this stuff on my day job that's over my left shoulder there, I don't write analyzers all day. I don't write some generators all day. I'd love to do that. That'd be great. But sometimes I just forget, where do you actually do this stuff? So you haven't tricked me yet, but please don't make that a goal.
No, not my. Well, I am cheating, to admit. I have a bit of a cheat sheet there, because I would have not found out that this is how I get to the name of the identifier now.
I mean, I know
I have a cheat sheet on the side.
So, but you almost, if you're gonna do like a stream on this or talk about this stuff, like I said, it's so vast. You almost need to keep these things in mind, because you're gonna forget. Like, how do I get the name of one of these things? Just like what you showed there. Is that obvious? I don't think so. Not at first glance. So
no, and I keep forgetting. I need to look at other analyzers, how they solved it.
Yep.
And
Woo.
so part of our tests are working, but I suppose our C# 9 tests are not. We expected 0 diagnostics for the C# 9 test, but still got all the diagnostics. So now we need to find out, are we compiled? Is the analyzer that is hosted in a project that is C# 10 or above, or C# 9 or below?
Yeah. And this is where, okay, now you got me. Because I know you can do it. Not just because I know you know, but I know you can do it. I don't remember exactly where you find that out. On the
it's either in the somewhere in the options, either compilation options or parse options.
Okay.
Language, that's the language string. Okay, so it's got to be the parse options, but they're not here. Options, but those are different options. Okay, I need to go to my cheat sheet.
You have it there for a reason.
Oh no, it is. Oh, it is in the compilation options, but yeah, those are the generic compilation options because they apply for both Visual Basic and C#.
Who cares about VB? Come on.
So we well, isn't it that they still add feature? Or no, don't add new features, but
it's a weird world
with C#. Like I saw this the other day. The .NET 10 preview 1 is now out, and this Visual Basic will support this overload resolution priority thing, which Stuart showed us end of last year. Hello, Stuart.
Hi, Stuart. Welcome.
So, yeah, you're right. You have to cast that to C# compilation because, yeah, I mean, I said that jokingly about Visual Basic. That's actually how I started my career, was on VB way back in 1995. But, you know, over time as doing more and more in .NET, it just all became C#. But VB is still supported. It's not really developed that much anymore. I don't think they're adding any new features, but when things like overload resolution, that thing that they added where you can be a little bit more specific as to which one gets precedence, that was something at VB they had to go, well, we do have to kind of support that. So at least it just works. So yeah, in this case, that compilation is just compilation, but there are 2 versions of Roslyn, one for VB and one for C#. So, but we know which one we care about. So.
I was doing the wrong thing though. We need to cast the compilation into C# compilation, and there we have the language version. Okay, so this is now, I hope, our beautiful enum where we can check if it is C# 9 or below. Language version is, so if it is less than or equal to language version 9, I guess we say do nothing.
Yep.
And this should, well, not all of them are green, but well, I consider this. I forgot what this one is doing, but I would say it's green enough. Now I want to see it in action.
It's green enough. Or for people that are colorblind, it's checked enough.
It's checked. Yeah, but we mentioned, ooh, have they? I'm used to, it's been a while since I used Visual Studio last, but I have the feeling that, yeah, I had to restart Visual Studio. I didn't, and they show, was this improved?
So you're actually running into something that I think in, if you go to help about for Visual Studio, I'm guessing you probably have one of the latest for like 17.13 or 17.13.2. With 17.13, I don't know the details, but I think they did do some things to make reloading or updating or when these are run. I know one thing with source generators is now source generators are only run on save. They're not run all the time. You can change that. You can go back to saying, hey, I want these to run whenever I press a keystroke, essentially. But they changed it because, you know, again, people were writing source generators that sucked and didn't perform well. So what they did is they changed it to being a default of it's run now on every save, I believe. And I think there were a couple of other options that might have changed in terms of when things are potentially reloaded. I also know, though, that sometimes Visual Studio just seems to work when I change stuff, and it will pick up the changes, and then sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, then I go, okay, shut it down and start up again. You know,
I see.
So, but I think this is where Rider wins, because Rider has to be cross-platform, and therefore it doesn't even target .NET Framework. And so it can be a little bit better in terms of how it can handle loading a generator or an analyzer project and then reloading it, I think. So
because in .NET Framework I can't really unload an assembly, and in Core you have this assembly load context.
Well,
I'm not sure if I recall correctly.
I think with Visual Studio, one of the things that they've done over time is, like, for example, with Windows Forms, because everybody's writing Windows Forms app. No, not really, but it's still it's still surprisingly one of the most, if not the most popular project types, mostly because of legacy, because of all the Windows Forms projects that were created years and years ago and still are running today. Well, they wanted that to work on .NET Core and now .NET, even if it's just Windows specific and it's not cross-platform. At least that way you're running on the modern version of .NET. But the designers and stuff, it got kind of squirrely because that's .NET, but the Windows or Visual Studio is hosting .NET Framework. So what they've done over time is they're starting to host more things out of process. So when you're running Visual Studio, if you actually look at Task Manager, you'll see other executables running that are using IPC, inter-process communication, to Visual Studio to report things, but then those executables can be hosted using whatever version of .NET they want.
I see.
So, so the long and short of it is, at some point it might become possible where they can do this in Visual Studio so that analyzers don't have to be .NET Standard. That's also an investment in time, and that's way above my pay grade or understanding of what they can do on VS or what they can't. So that's where you go talk to the team, because they're the ones that would make that decision. So yeah, it was working. It is working. It is giving you the squiggle, so that's good.
It seems that you do wrongly report it on this class 2. So perhaps.
Oh, I see. So maybe that code that you wrote is not quite.
I guess this was the not quite greenness. Maybe if it's not okay, maybe we do have to. No, I'm not sure.
But this is where you if you got a test, you just step in and debug it.
Yeah.
And just see, okay, what is it that I'm actually really looking for when I don't have the class keyword there? What does or does not show up? And again, this is why unit tests is, when I code on my streams or when I'm writing when I do my videos, this is something that I preach so hard. You have to have tests. You have to have unit tests because of things like this.
Yeah.
You want to look at what's actually there. So is this a case where it does have the class keyword or doesn't?
It seems so. It is indeed the class keyword. So it's got to be one of these. Oops, where's the specs? Here's the specs. It's got to be one of these 3. So we actually have the class keyword here. Yeah.
Okay. But we want to test to see. Oh, so it does have the class keyword there, but we're still reporting it as a diagnostic. Okay.
No, wait a minute. It's not the class keyword, but it is. What do I not understand here? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I made a mistake here. I said class declaration, not class keyword. Okay.
Let's see what that does.
Okay,
easy.
No, it's green. And check mark.
He's just like, okay. Oh, it's easy. It's easy.
Okay, cool. Just built and it's done.
Done.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Now what we did earlier with the context to get the concurrency and the code generation configuration ready, we hit Control-Alt-Enter and got nice completions, but we don't have one yet. I guess, okay, one could argue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 6 keystrokes to edit, but hitting Control Dot, selecting one, it's maybe 2 keystrokes less. So let's optimize that.
Well, and not just that. I mean, that's a good point. But it's not just editing it here. What happens if you had hundreds of records in your, not just project, but your solution that didn't follow the convention you're looking for? What you get, and you can't show it here because you don't have your fixer in place just yet. But if you want to apply a fix on something, that window, that diff window that shows up, yeah, whatever you just did, if you show that again.
Right, I did something.
So you see in the previous changes, you can fix all occurrences in a solution. So if you create a fixer that will say, I want to add class or struct, and I'm okay with making that change across my entire solution, across all projects in the solution, I can pick that and it will do that for every single one. So yeah, it's only 5 keystrokes to put in class. But the code fix, this is where it has that advantage, is that it can make it one and done. It has all the semantics to pick the right locations in your code, but it's currently violating your analyzer, and make that change accordingly. So that's why code fixers are so nice.
We have one prepared. Well, again, the basic skeleton of it. So here's now our code fix provider. This is now not in, I'm not sure what I'm trying to get at. Anyway, so this is similar from the template. We don't derive from Diagnostic Analyzer, but from code fix provider. We need to export this code fix provider for a specific language and give it a name. Template used the class name as a name of. It also suggested shared, and then had us implement the fixable diagnostics. I guess I need to change this to our one, which is just a string, not the diagnostic descriptor that we had in the analyzer. And what I see where it is now coming from, also from the template. For the get fix all provider, it uses the well-known fix all provider batch fixer. Is this the one so that I can apply it for document solution projects?
Yes, I believe that's what in all honesty, I don't think I've ever changed this from anything other than batch fixer. But I think if you want it to be a little bit more constrained or specific, you can say, well, like, is a document project or a combination of those, because you do sometimes see code fixers that don't have all those options at the bottom for various reasons. So yeah, you can be a little bit more prescriptive if you want to be.
Like only containing members or only within the containing type. Cool. I did not know that. And then we just need to, again, register our code fix provider. We, again, like all the Roslyn components, we get in some context. And I suppose now this context has some stuff we could do.
One thing real quick that I just want to mention, and I'm guilty of doing this, so I'm not going to be on the pulpit preaching that everybody's wrong, because I'm just as wrong on this. But code fixes should technically be in a separate project from your analyzer. The reason for this is because the APIs that exist for code fixes have references to things called workspaces. And if you don't use that stuff, it never gets loaded, and then you don't have to worry about that assembly or that package getting loaded and messing up with what Visual Studio currently has loaded. But if you do, then it can become a problem. It's somewhat of a specific thing. So the recommendation is to have your analyzers and your code fixes actually in 2 separate projects, and then you can build like a meta package to have both of them published in NuGet at one time. But if you don't run into that scenario, which I never have, then technically it's not an issue. So it's just something that I wanted to bring up and tell people that if you want to do it truly the official way, they should be in separate ones. But you can get away with having them in a single one if you don't run into that scenario. So I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, of course. I never thought about this. But yeah, if I'm doing a .NET build, there is no IDE that could invoke my code fixes.
Well, that too. Yeah. So, and there won't. I mean, the code fixes are only for IDE purposes because you can't make them automatically run. Oh, I've thought about that. I've thought about doing something very cute where you could get like a meta programming thing where you could say, "Hey, could this automatically just apply this?" And it gets very squirrely after a while. I don't know if that's an American phrase or what, but don't do that. It's not worth it. But yeah, you're right. This is something that a human has to intervene on. So
not to spoil anything, but we kind of have planned for this sort of our next season to kind of do that. There is a project called Open Rewrite, and basically would like to, which is Java based, I think, but it would be cool to have the Roslyn syntax tree for that, and then you write your rewrite recipes. But you said now
have my attention.
Do not. You now said do not do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
perhaps let's rethink it.
The thing is, you have to, like, what I was actually thinking of creating something that would kind of do that. It would look for places in your code that you want to have changed, and then would automatically apply a change through like a code fix or something like that. There's a product from what's the name of that? I forget the name of the company, but they created MetaLlama. What's the name of them? I forgot.
Sure.
It's like on the tip of my tongue. What is that?
Postjob. Yes.
Yeah. And so they basically forked Roslyn and created this so that you can do a lot of the AOP stuff and a lot of the meta programming stuff using essentially their stuff that's built on their own version of Roslyn. And I think now they've open sourced it as well. So that's another option, but it's fun to build your own, right?
So when we start that next season, we'll come back to you if we may.
Yeah.
Like I said, you got my attention. I'm interested to see where you go with that. So that'd be at least interesting to see how far you get. So anyway. Fix it. So this is the other side of the equation, so to speak, where you know that the only reason your code fix is going to be called is because a diagnostic was reported with what you said you could fix from that array. Yeah, the fixable diagnostics. And so now you're going to be called, and so now you can also assume some things as well. The only reason you would have been called is because a record somewhere doesn't have that either struct or class keyword within it. So now you just have to kind of dig through the context to figure out how do you get there. So I'm going to throw back to you. Where do you think you go?
I noticed there is a register code fix, which sounds promising,
True.
and which gets we need a diagnostic and also a code action, which I suppose then is some delegate. Is it? No. Which we can.
Yeah, you picked the finish line. So now you're trying to figure out how do I get to the finish line?
So I'm doing from the bottom up. Okay, yeah.
Because this is you're right. This is the last thing you'll call to say, hey, IDE, I could provide a code fix here, but now you have to figure out how do you get the parts in here so that it works.
So we need this code action and also that diagnostic. Well, I can suppose the diagnostic is in here. It's diagnostics. Oh, for the fix all provider, because I could be fixing multiples of these, right?
Yes. So when I use this, I typically use first. So I just do a dot first on this, and that gives me the first diagnostic. Because in my case, in this case, you're only going to get one diagnostic per report, essentially. So you don't have to worry about, do I have more?
Okay.
So you have that. That was the easy part.
Well, now perhaps detecting patterns. Since trying to go back to this analyzer where in order to create this location, the diagnostic, we did diagnostic.create. So can we maybe create a code action And this code action now with a title and a function that returns a document and an equivalence key.
Yeah, the equivalence key, there's an edge case for that as to why you'd care about that. I typically have never cared, but there's a reason why it's there in the API, and I honestly don't know exactly what that would be. So I'm trying to see actually what I usually put in for the equivalence key, just the actual description of the code fix or whatever that's going to be, but just for simplicity's sake. So like exactly what you did there. Okay.
And in this action, we only have the cancellation token. So I suppose this will be too little. So we need more. Okay. So we need to create a new document. I have a déjà vu. We did this in a couple of episodes ago when we started with our, we had a tool that automatically globalizes usings. And there we went to the solutions, to the projects, and then had documents, and then we're modifying these documents. So getting a bit of a déjà vu here. So in the documents, this is then what is in the is this now in the workspaces API? Do I get that right?
It is. And this is kind of where, again, you may want to split this out. But this is going to work for what we need to show for like this demo stream.
Yeah.
So you'll be fine there. And so, so now you have to find the document where the analyzer was reported from the context.
There is a context.document. So perhaps we pass this into here as well. I mean, we could just turn it, but that's just leaving it unchanged. And now we would need, similar to, I guess let's take a look again at the syntax tree. So we need to find, I guess we know, do we also know the location? Do we know, can we get this node out of there?
Yeah. So that's what you're going to need to try to find. So if you go back to your code fix, and you look at the document, and this is what I typically do, but there may be other ways to get to the end. Is first thing I do is with the document is you want to get the syntax root. You want to get that first root part of the tree. And so, and this is what you can call await now, because the Visual Studio is yelling at you because you're not awaiting in an async. So
it's also past the cancellation token. We do not. This does not take cancel. It does.
It does.
It's just called token.
And speaking of that, that's one that I've noticed come up recently, is that if you're writing asynchronous methods, there's analyzers now to kind of tell you to push you to having a token that's passed along as a parameter with all of them, which is nice because you really want to do that with all of your async stuff. Is always that, even if you're not using it, at least you have that there so you can pass that down to other async methods. So
I guess again, we're on the net standard, so it's not all the analyzers enabled, but if they were, we would get a squiggly here, and then I guess I do a control dot, and then it's here. So we have the root, which is now, the entire root of the document, but we need to find, we do know the diagnostic. So the diagnostic also has a location, and we would know the location is, example is this here.
Right. So you're close. If you go back to your code fix provider, there should be on the root, and I know you're doing the right thing with putting a question mark because it could be null. I always assume it's not. If you got to that point, it should be. I don't know how that could not have a root syntax node. Oh, is this because you have to put it around document that gets syntax root because you have an await and you can't? Is that what it's complaining about?
Converting null literal or possible null value is not what I'm saying. Right. Yes. So I need to.
Yeah, that's the fun part of await. And now that should be okay.
No warning. Yep. So let's also pass in the location. Okay. So we don't have the diagnostic yet. Yeah. Just ordering these around.
Okay.
So can we like get a root from a location or a node from a location?
You can. It should be a find
node.
Huh.
But now what you pass in there is not quite location.
But a span.
Right.
Text span. And whether we want to find inside trivia or get the innermost node for a tie. So this location has a text span. It has a source span, which is a text span.
Right.
So this would be the identifier, actually. Can we now from?
And so now, you're running into also a kind of a technical point here, which is you have to be conscious of what location you reported, because that's going to show up on the other side, and you have to think about, well, what is that actual node? Is it the whole record declaration, or is it just the identifier? Because right now you're just putting the squiggle under the identifier.
Yes, because I had it in the test like that. But if we were only going, what we had initially, actually, if we go for the entire location of this entire record declaration syntax, so is this how we again can now basically cast this to a record declaration syntax?
You can, if you want to keep so that the squiggle is just on the identifier. And again, this is kind of personal preference as to, you could put it on the whole document, which would be awful. But you could do that. But if you want to put it on the identifier, that's fine. And then you just have to do like I think a dot parent, because the parent of the identifier would actually be the record declaration syntax. If you give it the location of the entire record declaration, well, then you have that from the find node call. So then you can just cast that directly. So again, you just have to know what you're reporting and what you get on the other side, and just keep that bookkeeping all in place.
So find node so find node. Oh no, the parent may be null. Well, in this case, we know it's not.
Right.
So this is now the node, and well, this one has a class or. Oh no, it does not have a class or record. Yeah, there it is. Class or struct keyword. So we set this to syntax token. Do we now need the syntax factory to create that? Yeah.
You're now illustrating the fun of Roslyn, another aspect, which is everything is immutable. So
yes.
So there's many ways that you can handle this. One of them is what you're about to show, which is to use a syntax factory class. And that is one that I typically use, which is to build up basically a new piece of code that I want to use to replace the node that I currently have. So that's one way to do it. And that's not easy, because the syntax factory requires you to know what the structure of that new code should look like from a syntax tree perspective. There's a tool that somebody created, and I'm blanking on the name of it. It's I think his name is Kirii, Kirii.
The Roslyn quota, right?
That's it. Thank you. That's a great one for this case, because you can say, well, I want my code now to look like this. And what it will do is it will generate like what you want as a syntax factory representation of that. So yeah, this tool is very helpful for that kind of thing. In your case, we may be able to do something else. I just want to see if this will work. If you can say node equals node width, so you say dot width. There you go. With class.
With classes to a keyword. That's amazing.
That's perfect.
So what everything in Roslyn is immutable. So you can't, like what you were just showing, you couldn't just assign that property, because if you think about it, effectively that would change the code that is in the code viewer right here. And the user would be quite mad with you because you're mutating what their code is without their permission. But so it's immutable, so that doesn't change. But what I want to offer them is what the code would look like if they wanted it. And so that's where you get that diff view. When you show the code view, it's a nice value add, a nice benefit, because that shows them, hey, this is the world you could be in by having these as immutable structures. So that's kind of nice. So I'm thinking maybe with width. So what that wither does there with the width, you see these methods all over the place in Roslyn. You'll basically say, I want to take this node or whatever it is, and I'm going to create a new copy of it with the change I want. And so it makes it easier because you don't have to define a whole new structure. I just want to say, I want to either have the class or struct keyword in there. Yep.
So the class keyword. Okay. So this now takes a syntax token. So we use the syntax factory to create this token with the class keyword, and now we have our new node. But we still have the old document, so we have not mutated the old document.
Right. What I would do here is actually assign that to like var new node. Because it's not going to overwrite the old one that's in the document. But I think you do need to keep the original one there. So I always just keep a new one around that way so that they're separate. And now at this point, I think you almost have you're almost close. So now you have what the new node should be. And so now you need to create a new root that says take the old one and replace it with the new one, and I get a new root from that.
So we need on the, okay. So we now on the original root, we can remove nodes, we can replace nodes.
There should be a singular. There should be a node.
And I guess, so this is why we put in the old node there, yes, and the new node. And so this is now a new root. And now, can we say document with syntax root and the new one?
Perfect.
Is it time to run the tests? Well, I guess it's always time to run tests.
Seems so, yes.
When do you not?
So our code fix providers. Oh yeah. Single supported diagnostic. Did I I believe, because we changed the diagnostic, but I haven't changed it here in the tests though.
Okay.
So it was expecting.
This is where you use constants. So that's the same everywhere.
Introduce
I'll let you do that later. Okay, still failing, but
invalid cast exception.
Ooh.
Of compilation unit syntax.
To what? What does it think it needs to cast?
So the parent is here a compilation unit syntax. But this is what we have to test for. Oops. But we did change it to identifier, or is it still on the entire the analyzer? So the analyzer is now on identifier, yes. So we get try to find the node. the node that we find is the record declaration. Oh, we get the entire record declaration syntax.
So we don't need to do parent. And that makes sense because the parent of the record declaration is the compilation unit syntax. So that made sense why it failed. We just assumed too much. We don't even need to go parent. So, okay. This happens all the time when you're building these things. It's always like, oh, find that out. And
yay!
Now it works.
Can we go to the example? Maybe we do a build. And now do control dot, and we see our title. Is that ours? No, that's a different one. Or is it now? Is it for the fixer? Maybe time to restart this.
It might be.
I'll briefly do that. Do you need to restart Visual Studio, or is it fine to just?
I usually start VS altogether, just because then I know it's not hung onto it somewhere that I don't remember. I'm paranoid that way. But
yeah, we may need to actually.
Yeah. But this is also good to illustrate because, writing analyzers, writing source generators, it's not a trivial task. If people are usually writing applications and building class libraries, it's usually not. You run into these idiosyncrasies here and there with writing these types of things that you just have to kind of know. So it's a little bit of a higher barrier to entry, but you do it enough, you just kind of get gaslit, I guess is the best way to just go, oh yeah, that's how it works. So did you start it up or again? Or?
I'm not cheating. And switching to just open the solution in wider. So different IDE, which didn't know anything before. So it's all not opinionated, and we can now do a control dot or an alt enter, and we get the explicitly add the class keyword to reference record declaration. Okay, all right. And there it is. Oh, that's amazing. There it is. Ooh, and so we should also be able to. So that's a drawback of Rider or Visual Studio. We can't apply this now to the entire solution. When Visual Studio, we could say do this for everything.
Well, we know the code fix works. So Visual Studio, if you started, it should pick that up. You're also, you're just saying I want to name it a class. I should also be able to have an option to say I want to name it a struct, or I want it to be a struct, right?
Ah, right. But this would change. This would change semantics, wouldn't it?
It would. Yes, you're right. But it's also you said at the beginning, I want to be explicit. So you're right that that implicitly it's always a class, and so I want to explicitly make it a class with the keyword there. But me as a consumer of this may go, you know what? I want these actually all to be structs. So maybe I want to have the option. So you could create another code fix because you can register more than one. You can say, I also want to give them the option to say, it's the same diagnostic. I'm just going to create another one that will register a code fix to say I want the struct keyword.
So basically just duplicating it. I guess a lot of code could be shared, but just for a quick solution, and instead do a struct keyword then.
1, 2, 3, you'll know what that means later. I would actually, like you're saying, I would pass in the name of what I want there.
Yeah, this would be wiser. Just to quickly, then we also need the new. The title is, we just did it here. So building that. And building it in. Right, if we remove that again, do we now see both? Ooh, nice. Cool. So I can now make the choice. And if I had the entire project, entire solution, I could do this with 4 keyboard keys. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, the stuff is so powerful when you get it all to work. It's like you get that endorphin rush or whatever that is, and to me, I do. It's like it's just whatever that serotonin, whatever that is in your brain that makes you go, oh, and you finally solve a problem. It's like you start to see just how powerful these things can be, and if you go back to your code, like for example, if you just go back into like the analyzer, let's go into that analyzer again. Is that, there's this stuff in here, but really, if you look at what's in that execute method, that is the heart and soul of the analyzer. The rest of it's kind of just the scaffolding you need to have there to get the compiler and the IDE to know that this thing exists. But this is what you're really doing. This is what you're really looking for. And typically what I found with analyzers and even code fixes and stuff is the amount of code ends up usually being pretty small. It's usually not a lot that you end up doing. It's just trying to get to that journey where you finally go, okay, this is what I really wanted to do. May take some time, but then you end up with, wow, I actually didn't have that much code to write to do something that's actually what I consider to be very helpful for users. So
that's really cool. Well, usually my timing is poor. We're quite advanced already, but there's still two more things that I'd like to show. Shall we maybe do a bit of a quicker run through refactorings and also suppressors?
Yeah, let's do that, especially because Stuart mentioned something about he built a suppression analyzer and it was really tough. So it's your stream. I'll kind of let you drive the rest of the time and figure out what you want to do. But he did mention that, so probably good to at least talk about that.
Yeah, let's try to suppress something.
Okay.
Let's try to suppress diagnostics. Okay. Poor choice of words. I am now switching to maybe speed this up slightly to a different solution where we have the code already.
Which is fine.
Because, well, I think Eva, was it in our first or very second live stream, couple of 3 years ago, where we settled, where we went through to different testing frameworks and we thought, how do we name our tests? And there's various different schemas. What we went with is with this form of the method on the test, the scenario, and the expected output or expected behavior.
Yep.
But there is an analyzer, which, well, it's not in a song. I should actually produce this diagnostic, right? Because we're now in this project, can't really show it here, but there is an analyzer. If we enable all the analyzers, this will be flagged because it's a public method that contains underscores. And there is from the .NET an analyzer which flags these.
Okay.
And so then earlier built a suppressor which suppresses this diagnostic, but only if it is a test method.
Nice.
And I think there is also now key unit.
You're hitting on a point here that's, I think, really good. I know you're pressed for time, so I won't interrupt much. But I do want to bring this up because when I first heard of suppressors, I'm like, why would you want to build one? Because you can use an editor config to suppress. You can use a no-warn element in your CSproj file to suppress. But what you just said, I think, is really important. It's contextual. I have a test class where I have a test method, and that is okay to put underscores on. And you can't be that specific with an editor config or no warn setting. So that's where this can be, tailored to just suppressing it in those certain kinds of contexts.
Maybe let's show this briefly. Going to a analyzer. What if we were not to call this? We get this squiggly. So what static ways do we have to suppress? You mentioned an editor config. So we could, I think there's a template by now, is there? New editor config.
Oh, perfect.
And analyzers. which diagnostic is that? So that is RS1025.
Oof.
RS 1.
You should be able to search for it.
Yes.
And see, it doesn't show up here.
Interesting.
Huh.
Is it not RS205?
It might be the thing.
1025. I made a mistake.
Oh, okay. There it is. Okay.
Okay. So here it is, and it's the severity. That's the default severity, I suppose. So we could maybe say
disabled,
just factoring only or disable.
Yep.
And it's gone now. Cool.
Nice.
But this is I can only do this for an entire project. So I would get all the underscores, even for, well, maybe the test project, maybe the example is not perfect, but I would do regular methods and I would also not be.
If you had the editor config at the solution level, it would be for everything. And so you can put editor configs in projects and stuff like that, but it's, like the point you just made, the scope is potentially too wide for what you're looking for.
There is also a little helper, suppress or configure this issue. Let's see what we got. So we can suppress via a pragma warning disable. I don't find them too aesthetic though.
Yeah. It's okay. I mean, I use it, but it's not entire. And then you can also, one of the options is let's put it in an attribute, a suppress attribute. But it's like,
Suppress in a attribute.
Attribute.
Ooh, we can add a justification there. Demo.
Yep. So all those work, but like you said, if you want it to be contextual, if you want it to be for just like a specific case, then the suppressor diagnostic could be really nice.
So this is actually what this one is doing. I have a couple of tests, for example, for the MS test framework, so that we suppress. We have here the method given when then, and again we surround this with this syntax, so we get the location of this diagnostic, and can then say, okay, at location 0, or maybe here at location 1, this diagnostic should be suppressed. Also for any unit where we don't have a test method, but we have the test attribute. Or with X unit, we don't have that. X unit is the fact. But also, well, we also have a test with
theories.
What's it called? The theory. Yeah, so in X unit it's the theories. What is it in N unit again? The test data?
Yeah.
So in X unit it's theory with inline data, and in N unit it's just test data, multiple of those. You're going to have to support T unit now, by the way. I hope you know that.
Ooh, yes.
Yep.
A to-do. Don't do it now, but
just a small one.
Yeah.
So this should now suppress diagnostics only for these. I believe I also have a test for where we just have regular methods that are not attributed and should not be suppressed. Because, also having the opposite to be confirmed. Yeah, I got it somewhere. I haven't looked at this code in quite a while. So another suppressor is very similar to an analyzer, as in, I think it even derives from analyzer. And then, well, so the supported diagnostics are just empty. But a suppressor now, excuse me, I need to go back here. There we go. But a suppressor now has supported suppressions. And you also set up a rule where we have the target ID that we want to suppress. And we can add our own. Now the suppressor also has an ID. And then we don't report we then override this report suppressions. We get all of the reported diagnostics, which is a collection of the ones that we support via the rules that we want to suppress.
So this will only, not all of them within a compilation, just the ones that you said there.
Only
CA
the
1707.
This would only, we put in here, get all of the CA 1707.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, then again, getting the locations of these and trying to find if that thing indeed is a method, because yeah, there is only test methods so far. I don't think there's test properties or something, not that I know of. Well, if there are no attributes, then it cannot be a test method. And then having a checking, is it a test method? Well, doing it, for example, for MS test, and the NUnit check would be to find, well, actually, this is not doing it syntactically, but actually doing it semantically.
Yep.
So we get a hold of this attribute list. Oh, this is where I learned how the difference that you can also have multiple attributes in a single attribute. What can I not think of? Like suppress. I'm not doing suppressed message, and so we can have multiple. I'm not sure this is now called, but this is one attribute list. But we can have multiple attribute lists.
Perfect illustration of what you have to support in a syntax tree and what you find in a semantic model. The semantic model is just so much easier because it's just going to tell you have 6 attributes on this method. But from a syntax tree perspective, you have 3 attribute lists where each of them have 2 attributes in them. And it's like, what the hell? I mean, and I don't code like that. I typically will put every attribute separately, but it's perfectly legal for somebody to do that. And so the semantic model kind of gets away from that syntactic differences and makes it so that it's easy to find stuff. So, using like the semantic model here for finding stuff it's not reflection, but it kind of sort of feels like it, and it makes it easier to analyze stuff that you're looking for. So,
so I should really use your semantic model already as well. Do I get you right? So
potentially,
so I don't need to think about stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it comes down to, you have to look at like performance and what makes the most sense, but you're ending up getting probably to the semantic model anyway. So you might as well just get all the attributes that way. But
and actually using the semantic model, because I could have the alias something here where we could have using alias is now my suppress message. Where's that system?
You're bringing up a great point here, because a syntax tree won't tell you that. It won't tell you that you've aliased. It's just telling you that's the name of it. Semantically, though, it will tell you what the symbol actually is. So much, that's a good point too. So
what I also found out, this is without tests, I would have never found this out, is that when we type an attribute, but it's not quite there yet, maybe something like so, then it's of type error type.
The compiler team has said they will always give you something back, no matter how garbage your code is. But if the code is garbage, you may get things like error symbols or stuff like that, so but you can look at the actual, I think, trees and the semantic, the symbols, and they'll tell you if there's associated diagnostics with them or something like that. But you also have to be a little careful, because you may be getting incorrect code, and you have to be defensive around that as well. So
syntactically, but from a semantic model, and then finding out now if this type information, this now, doing this basically by name, best idea. I could think of to check if the containing assembly starts with any unit, and then checking the full names. Yeah, well, I guess this is not the most stable thing. Should this ever? Should
I have a
this
suggestion.
assembly name ever change?
Well, what you can do is, does this project, is it referencing all of these test packages or not?
No, it's not.
Okay. So then maybe this is, I get why now you're doing this, because you're just trying to match by name. And I think this is fine. I think in this case, it's okay. What you can do is off of the compilation, there's a method called get type by metadata name. And so what that will do is it will give you a symbol for a name, and then you can don't use equals. You don't want to use a strict just double equal sign, but there's a symbol equality comparer type, I think. And you can say, given two symbols, are they the same? And it's important to do it that way. You can't just use a double equals because it won't necessarily work the way you think it should. Symbol equality comparer will. So you could do it this way, but this is assuming that in your compilation, in your project, you have referenced something of that type. And since you're not referencing the MS test X unit assemblies, which makes sense, you don't want to have all those referenced. The best you can do is match by name. And I think that's okay. Those usually won't change, in all those test libraries. So
is this something that could add benefit to add to the end unit analyzers, which may have a reference to, or I guess, should this be a separate analyzer that now explicitly has an end unit reference, which now can do this, and it's also now then more stable?
So you could potentially have different versions of this package for each test package. That's another way to approach it. And then you could assume, well, what you could do is you could assume is, if I'm using this package, if I'm using your package to analyze a test project that uses NUnit, for example, your package doesn't necessarily, like, you'll reference NUnit, but you'll make it a private reference because this gets it squirrely, but you don't want to have that package reference with your package. It gets, especially source generators, that gets difficult. But what you could do is, as long as that NUnit package is loaded, when mine is loaded, then I could actually find types by metadata names and do it that way. So it's kind of up to you. Do I have one package that I use string names to find, like, for all the three, or do I create packages individually for each test framework type? I'm almost thinking the latter. I think that might be better, but that's a to-do. So don't do that now. We don't have time.
we have enough episodes for a long time.
Definitely.
And then eventually, when we are sure, okay, this is a test method, then eventually now suppressing, not reporting a diagnostic, but reporting a suppression by creating a suppression and passing in the rule and also the diagnostic that we want to suppress.
Do you also look to see if the test method has underscores in it, or do you just not care and you just say, it doesn't matter, either way, I'm going to suppress it?
I don't. I just suppress it because
it doesn't matter. I mean, if it doesn't have them, so what if it's being suppressed and it's not being reported? It doesn't matter. I'm just wondering if you wanted to go that extra route to say, I'll only suppress this if the method has underscores in it.
Is this something you would recommend to be as explicit as possible?
It's a thought. That's why it's a good to do. I don't really know if that's going too far, or if that's actually better. It's a thought. So I'll leave that as an exercise to the curious observer. So
and then we actually also have the tests that then confirm. It's an older project, Net 7 still. That then confirm that the diagnostics are then indeed suppressed, but only if it is a method that is attributed with one of these well-known attributes.
This is great. I mean, I'm glad when you mentioned this again for me to be on the stream and I heard about this, I'm like, this is a nice little tool to have. I don't know how often you'd want to build a suppressor, but it's nice to know it's there for exactly like a case you just mentioned, and if you're building a library, it's like, well, I know this analyzer could kick in from .NET, but in my specific case, I don't want that to happen. I could write a suppressor then to do it for that specific case. So it's nice. I kind of like that.
Now I'm wondering, what you mentioned earlier is that we shouldn't combine analyzers, or it's a recommendation to not combine analyzers with fixers.
Yeah.
Is it cool to combine analyzers with suppressors, since a suppressor is inheriting from analyzer? Is that the same concern?
I would think so. I think that would be okay. I think you could put analyzers and suppressors in the same project. That would be my guess. I think that should be fine.
Cool. Stuart's scenario was to do that, to elaborate that's discriminated unions. The UNet. Okay. And to suppress this pattern match may not look exhaustive, but it actually is. So, okay. So suppressors really are to suppress somebody else's diagnostics.
Right.
Suppressions currently are not supported in wider, but it's coming in the first release of this year. Cool.
Nice.
Now, do you perhaps have maybe 10, 15 more minutes, Jason? Or shall we wrap it up?
I'll give you 10. I do need to get back. You're all the way on like 8 hours difference from me. I'm still technically working, so I do need to get back.
Then maybe let's just make it a super quick one, because there is a fourth component that we would like to mention as well, which is a refactoring. I don't have an example here ready, but maybe let's just line it out, which kind of looks very similar to a code fixer. So I suppose refactorings combine refactorings with fixers, but not with analyzers and suppressors.
Yeah, I actually don't write refactorings that much, because it's, in my experience, it's a little hard to think of how, like, there's so many refactorings already now in like Visual Studio to do all the stuff that I want to do with refactoring. It's hard for me to think of one that I want to write custom, so.
Do I have a quick example ready? Well, actually, we may have a quick example ready from the solution that this is actually now we get into memory lane. This is how I started my Roslyn journey, because Wider had this cool feature: when you have an object, you can create an object initializer out of that and initialize all the accessible properties and fields with something null or default.
Okay.
And Visual Studio didn't have this at the time, so a friend of mine said, "Hey, can we build this?" I was like, there's this Roslyn thing. Maybe we just can. I hope now this demo works. So if we go into refactorings, our object initializers, I hope it just works. Where we could now have our nested struct, and if we do control dot here, of course it doesn't work. Yeah, it's an older project that I haven't quite taken a look at. But what it should do is offer so not based off of a diagnostic, just offer a little entry there to initialize all of the accessible fields and properties of this type. For example, with a record type, then just initializing all the, but unfortunately. Oh, maybe we can do, well, I guess it's a trust, or maybe we follow up on that next stream.
So
yeah,
but what it then looks like is, let's go to the object initializer, is creating a code refactoring provider that doesn't mention any diagnostics, because it's like a refactoring but not based off of a diagnostic. I said that wrong, right? Not sure.
well, refactoring is just it's something that isn't replacing code that potentially is a problem. It's just saying, hey, I want to take like this constant and I want to introduce a constant from this hard-coded value I just put in my code, but there was nothing wrong with what you did. You just lets you do that, or it takes like extract a method out of this code that I highlighted. So it's an action that a user has to initiate to see if there's something I can do at that particular location.
And so what we then try to find is does this already have a object creation expression, because then we don't need to add one. And eventually, if it's not a collection, because there's also collection initializers, we can then, again, very similar to the code fix provider, we register a code action, as a refactoring. And also, it has a title. Oops, did I scroll too far? Yes, it also has a title so that it shows in the IDE. And then eventually we do something very similar. We then return a new document, which now has this object initializer attached. So we would, if we had an example, this nested struct here has an accessible field and an accessible property with a setter. So we would identify those two and then create the braces around and set field to, and then set them to default.
And that's up to you to actually set them to what values you really want them to be.
Yeah,
the refactoring wouldn't know, right?
Excuse me?
It's up now to the user to set these to what they really want them to be. If they wanted them to be values.
Well, the refactoring that we built, now bears that doesn't work, but it sets it to default,
right?
The default, unless it finds in scope a symbol that has a compatible, or has the same type with the same name, but maybe in a different, regardless of the capitalization. So if I had an int field here, it would set it to this.
And see, that's where it can, like, that might be cool, but that also might be spooky action at a distance. And you're like, is that obvious to somebody using that? Now, if you just want the refactoring for yourself, that's cool, but is that potentially doing too much? You also don't want to use the word field, because that's going to become a keyword, a contextual keyword in C#.
Yes.
It'll work, but they're trying to get away from people to using field because it's going to be, it's an experimental feature right now, but I think it's going to finally be in 14. Is that the next version? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Jeez, it's getting to be a lot. A lot of versions. But yeah, if you turn that on, then something like that would work.
Yeah.
The one refactoring I created once was to say, I always want this is going to sound a little picky, but I always want my type definitions to have the fields first, the constructors, then the methods, then the properties, and alphabetize them too. And so I created refactoring that will standardize that, and it will reshuffle everything to put them in the right locations, But that was really the only one I've ever thought of. And that's also one that I'm like, I would like that just to happen on save. I'd like that is almost like a code standard thing that automatically runs. I have to remember now every time I create a class or whatever to run that refactoring, just to make sure that I've got it in the right, the right ordering. So that to me was like, I felt like that was going a little bit beyond what a refactoring really should be. It's cool to see it actually work, but it was also something that I almost would want it to be a requirement that it's in the right order. But anyway, so not to dismiss refactorings, highly useful. I just personally have never found like one where I go, I really want to be able to do this when I see this in code. So it's just a personal thing.
Awesome.
Cool.
I guess, we're at time, aren't we?
Yep. It's funny though how this can just keep going, right?
I know that's kind of our tendency as well on this stream, if I'm being completely honest. I think the longest we've ever had was it 4 hours? It was more than 4 hours, wasn't it?
Almost with Matthias, like that kind of escalated.
Completely escalated. But no, it was a great session. Jason, thank you so much for sharing all of your deep knowledge on this topic. And for the viewers, if you enjoy this and if you want to dive even deeper, please make sure to check out Jason's streams and videos and give him a follow.
Oh, yeah.
And also big thank you, obviously, to our viewers. It's always amazing to have you.
And I'll keep in mind next year when you're building your totally automated thing, include me on that. I'd love to see that. So.
Oh yes.
Yes, please.
So this will be. You will be making your hat trick on the show next year. What I'm trying to get at is thank you so much for coming back. We have a debt. Well, it's not a technical debt, but a debt in refreshing beverage. Shall we ever meet? I owe you.
I will definitely keep that in mind. I'll always take it. So, especially a good German beer,
Ooh, nice beer.
Yes.
Cool. Then, we will be back quite soon already, won't we?
Yeah, next week, I suppose.
Yes.
Is that right?
So,
yes.
a week from now, minus 2 hours and 15 minutes. Well, I guess we had quite a couple of to-dos. I guess it's time to implement some of them.
Sure is. Yeah.
Then, would you like
Thank you, everyone, again.
All right.
And see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back.